Howdy y'all and welcome back. If you have a Glock 43, 43X, or 48 and are looking to improve the trigger, two options available to you are Apex or Overwatch Precision. Now there are a ton of other options out there, and this is not intended to be an exhaustive comparison of the two, just a quick glance at two of the options that I have experience with. This 43X is my personal. This 43 belongs to a coworker and friend of mine who was not super happy with the factory trigger. Go figure. And I suggested both of these as options. She tried the Apex and my 43X, really liked it, but I maybe slightly nudged her in the direction of the Overwatch, and that's what she chose, and I'm glad she did, because it gives me a chance to compare the two. So let's take these over to the table and get a closer look. Glock 43, the OG model, safe and clear, predictable take-up, little bit of creep, and the break. Reset, also very Glocky, predictable, Glocky, not amazing, not terrible. All right, let's see what it says on the trigger gauge. Make sure we're zeroed out here. Gonna kind of hold it in place, but I'm not pushing, just trying to hold. And right at 6 pounds. Let me see if I can't get the gauge to hook a little bit lower on the shoe itself, something like that. Yeah, that one came in more like 5.5. Let's get one more, see if I can't split the difference. Little finicky because of that curve we got going on there. I think it's fair to call it 5.5. So let's get the Overwatch trigger in and see what happens. All right, we got the Overwatch Precision trigger installed. Let's take a look. So we've got our safety tang right, and then much less travel. Same kind of Glock mushiness. It's a lot cleaner. There's your creep right there. Just a little bit. Everything else has been left alone. The only thing I've put in is the trigger, which does come with the trigger bar. So let's put it on the scale. I'm going to go real low here. Right at 5. Let's give it another one. Just a hair under 5. So far off camera, I've gotten everything from 5.5, 4.5 to 5.5. So it's brand newly just put in here. It will break in a little bit more. For comparison, my 43X with the Apex trigger has, I don't know how many, but thousands of rounds. And same thing, you've got your tang. There's your travel. I'm on the wall, a little bit of creep, and it breaks. And this guy is going to come in about 4.5. That one came in right at 4. Usually it's coming in right at 4.5. Four and a half again. But what if I take the 43X slide and put it on this 43. Let's see what we get for a reading. Four and a half. And again, 4.5. So why does it come in lighter? Well, that's because I have lightened Terran Tactical springs in this slide. So it's getting less resistance as it moves through the cycle. So, super light and crispy. Just like the Apex. And I'll just throw this guy on here for comparison's sake. So apparently I'm going to judge that these pull weights, whether you go with the Apex or the Overwatch, they're going to come out about the same, right? So how do you choose which one to get? Well, even though I have the Apex in my gun, I recommended that my friend, or slightly urged her to pick up the Overwatch, and that is because if I can get these lined up right on top of each other, you can see how much farther forward the Apex trigger sits down under there. And maybe if I just do them like that, you can sort of see it yourself. There is more area to get your finger inside of versus this one. The safety tang on the Apex comes way forward, and I always just feel a little crunched in here. And I don't have particularly, giant sausage fingers or anything, but it always just feels a little pressed for space in here. It didn't feel, the Apex trigger on my Glock 19 didn't feel like this, but on the 43X it does. And it's just because the whole trigger sits farther forward. Let's see if we go into the back position, you can probably see that as well. There's just a little more real estate open on the Overwatch. They're both very flat. This has a little tiny bit of more curve than the Overwatch. The Overwatch is properly, truly flat. And they both have the same kind of squared off, right? If you look at it from the front of the shoe, they're both pretty squared off. This just feels more like a proper flat trigger to me. So they're both great. I would recommend either one. Subtle differences. You can't go wrong with either one. All right, before I forget, the spring kit in this 43X, in the slide here, I had gone with the full kit, and then one or two light primer strikes ended up going back to the factory striker spring. So really all that's in there is the lightened plunger spring, the safety block spring. And that alone is giving me almost a full pound lighter trigger pull than the stock spring. So take that for what it's worth if you're into trying to chase a lighter trigger pull. I think for small guns like this, especially if you're going to be carrying it for actual self-defense, there is such thing as too light of a trigger. I think somewhere around that 4.5 to 5 pounds is better to have a little more resistance, just so that you are less likely to have an oops in a panicky, adrenaline-fueled situation, right? So, also I noticed in the playback that I forgot to show the reset on the Overwatch, so let's see if I can't get a decent look at that. All right, so we're coming in, right? There's my wall. There's my break. There's the reset. There's the break again. So, huge improvement, even though it isn't much lighter than the factory trigger. Again, we don't necessarily want the lightest trigger possible in these little guys. It is much cleaner. It's the shorter take up, and it's the feel of the trigger shoe itself is just vastly improved over that kind of weird staged kind of, I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of Glock trigger shoe shape, if that makes sense. The way it feels under my finger just isn't great. Also, it's plasticky and just, I like a blocky metal trigger. So that's really all I got for this one, y'all. I'm going to be taking these to the range tomorrow, running them side by side. Obviously, the slide in my gun is going to give me that lighter trigger pull. I will probably get better results out of my own gun. I might switch the slides back and forth just to kind of play with that and give it a little bit more fair chance. But that's all I got for this one. Until next time, be easy, y'all.